Evening, everybody. We shall make a start. It's the Christmas edition of Children, Culture and Communities. And I've now, for the second year in the trot, brought sweets, which now means it's a tradition that the chairman of this committee brings sweets to every meeting. So I'm starting with a whisper. So I'll start with a whisper. You take one, I'll pass them around. Cool, right. This is a unique evening. We've got actually the whole committee has no apologies, apart from Johnny's arriving late. So we jeer or clap when he arrives in sarcastic tone? Got any apologies? Just one councillor steals Walshaw? No more? Any declarations of interest? Cool. We might get to the 7:40 finish at this rate. Minutes of the last meeting. I actually did check because we had a resolution under Michael Pavlovich's, Councillor Pavlovich's, which I didn't think was quite right, but it is right. And we now have the data which arrived yesterday. So I take it we haven't had a chance to scrutinise that, and we need to put that into the work plan. If you remember, at the end of the last meeting, Councillor Pavlovich is going to the exec in December the 12th. And then we need to discuss that after that point. So we'll talk about that under the work plan at the end. Anything else for the minutes of the last meeting? Cool. I shall sign those as a true record. We have no public participation tonight. So finance. Richard. Do the sweet sending back round?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'll just do my usual brief introduction and just to remind members that this is an extract, or mainly an extract, of the overall council monitoring report that went to executive last month. This is the second one that you've received this year. So this picks out the services that are under the responsibility of this scrutiny committee. So that's all of Martin's Children Education Directorate. And some elements of culture and communities. The first section of the report on the finance side, from page 9 through to page, I think it's probably about page 14, looks at the overall council position, and that shows in the table on page 14 a projected overspend of about 2.7 million for the overall council position. And you'll see in that narrative that that explains that is, although that's still a significant sum of money, is an improvement, or a significant improvement on the position earlier in the year and what was being forecast in 2023-24, where I think about an £11 million overspend was being forecast at this particular time. So that's moved in the right direction considerably. And then moving on to page 15, the table there looks at the budgets that this committee is responsible for scrutinising. And you'll see there that from Monitor 1, where we had just under 1.7 million projected overspend, that's now down to about a 1.4 million pound projected overspend. So a continuing improvement. Within children education is where that improvement has occurred. So that overspend of 1.1 million, I mean, although it's still a significant sum, again, that's represents a significant improvement and continuing improvement from the position that we've had in previous years. So I think in paragraph 24, I've just reminded members that at the same stage 2 years ago, we were projecting an 8.7 million pounds overspend. So that does reflect the significant work that has been done within the directorate, particularly in a number of key areas around agency staff in high cost placements and within home to school transport, where there's been significant improvement in the financial position in all of those areas. I think I will probably stop at that point and open that up to comments and questions from members.
Questions? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard, for your report and compliments to Martin and his department for getting the expenditure down to a much more reasonable level. I'm just wanting to ask about page 15 and the placement budgets mentioned in paragraph 25. I'm assuming these are out of area placements, but I suppose my question is, are these children looked after out of area by our choice, by a family constraint, or maybe by some kind of legal requirement?
Apologies. It's a variety of different reasons. So there are young people that are placed out of York that are with family members, so they're not, they're in family arrangements. Where it's impacted on cost is where we're reducing the number of young people either placed in independent fostering agencies or predominantly very expensive residential placements in the private market, which is changing, but will change over time. But it's recognised nationally that 83% of the residential market is provided by the private sector, being a huge challenge nationally at government level, and there will be some things that will be set out in the Children Wellbeing Bill that will be published in the next couple of weeks that will try and manage that market nationally. But I think we've got ahead of that and try to, where possible, provide support and placements within the local authority. Obviously, we've opened a children's home, which has supported us to do that, which is a Together We Can model, is a joint model with other agencies who provide support and clinical psychology. So all of that has, in its round, helped us keep young people in the city.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
Councillor Nelson, welcome back.
Thank you, Councillor Nichols. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to answer this or not, or whether you might, Martin, but one of the ways that savings were intended to be made last year, and it's mentioned here, is that kind of the new programme of clawing back direct payments. And I was just wondering if there was any kind of anything that you could say about how successful that's been so far, whether that's having an impact.
It's certainly had an impact on the financial position. So that was a one-off piece of work that was looking at clawing back some of the balances that people were holding in that respect. So that piece of work has been actioned. So yeah, but that has a one-off impact on the budget, and then I think the next stage of that is then reviewing the direct payments that are actually ongoing after that, which would have an ongoing saving. So I think that's probably where that piece of work needs to move to now, I think, is that ongoing review. I think if that's a summary of the position, wanting to add anything on that covers it. Yeah.
Thank you, that's great.
Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. There have been suggestions from government that there would be changes in the funding arrangements for SEND and for high needs, and a whole raft of elements which you won't get to know this year's until the settlement figure comes out just before Christmas Eve. But it's understanding what you understand with relation to York, because what might be a national picture in some circumstances, when it works through the formulas, by the time York gets it, it can differ quite significantly from what the national picture is.
So you're asking about our view on what the settlement might look like for 25-26. So there is some information out there from government, particularly from the DfE, around the national settlement, and they're talking about increases for SEND within the DSG of between 7% and 10% per pupil for local authorities. I think we feel that York will probably be at the bottom end of that range, so probably around about 7% per pupil increase, because of the national funding formula for high needs that was introduced about 2 or 3 years ago, and we're on a trajectory to a lower level of funding through that national formula. So we expect to be on that floor level of 7%, which, although it sounds a significant sum in the context relatively. It probably still isn't enough to bring our budget into a balanced position on its own for 25-26. That's a help, but we won't know fully until we get the full announcement in December. But that's our expectation at the moment on the high needs block.
Sharon, just a follow-up in terms of the per capita funding, which the government had. There's been a trajectory to try and even things out across local authorities, and as we've been in F40 for some time.
Yeah.
It's seeing where that is going in terms of for the standard amount that each people brings. Will that start to look fairer nationally from what you can see in terms of how it's working for us?
Within the high needs block, the way that formula works, there is still a significant element of that that's based on the historic spending of local authorities, and based on that, how that formula was designed to be implemented over a number of years, it will take a significant length of time for that to work its way out of the system. So I think the answer to your question is, unless there's any change in terms of the trajectory of that, when we get the full announcement in December or for future years, it's probably good. I think the original expectation, it was probably take about 12 years for that to work its way right through the system to get all authorities on to the full raw national funding formula for high needs.
Cool. Anybody else? I'll have one then. 41 about the safety valve becoming increasingly challenged to achieve. A bit more narrative to increasingly challenged to achieve.
Okay, so I mean, what the original target for the safety valve was for us to have by the end of next financial year 25-26 to have a balanced in-year high needs budget. So we were only spending on high needs the same level as the grant that came in from government through the DSG, and then at the end of that year to have removed the cumulative deficit. And removing that cumulative deficit would be a combination of us managing our own budget year on year, but also the contributions from DfE through the safety valve grant, that's 17.1 million. I think based on where we feel the settlement's going to be for next year, we believe that we will still have an in-year deficit next year, probably between £500,000 and £1 million on the high needs block, which will mean that we haven't been able to remove the cumulative deficit either at that time. So we're probably looking at taking another 2 to 3 years, I would think, realistically, to get that back into a balanced position. And clearly we will be discussing that with officials at the DfE, because they are monitoring our progress against that on a quarterly basis.
And is there a penalty for missing the target, or is it just the government just smile and say, you're all right, keep going, as long as you're paying it back?
I think if we were significantly away from the target, I think there's an enhanced monitoring process that they may want to impose on us in terms of our progression through that plan. And we're hoping that we're not going to be in that position, and that we'll be reviewing that plan and looking at how we can demonstrate to them that there's a possibility of bringing that back into balance over a longer period. A lot will depend on what the funding settlements are in future years, of course, as well. So, we've made assumptions about that as well in those plans. So it will be interesting to see how they respond to those revised plans when we put those to them.
All happy? Thank you. There you go. Get a takeaway after all.
Chair,
You okay?
just before you start, can I just apologise for being late? It was.
Your apologies.
Has it been given? Okay. Just the
maybe
irony
your
of being late because of childcare for a children's scrutiny committee sort of felt.
I just abandoned one. Welcome, Jenny, and Andrew, and Pauline. We're talking about hot off the press. I've got the own. Away you go. Thank you.
So good evening, everybody. And firstly, apologies for not being able to attend the last meeting, and thank you for accommodating me in this meeting. So I'm reporting on April 2023 to March 2024, which I always enjoy because we're quite a way through the year. So it's a lovely opportunity to revise all the great stuff we did last year. So first of all, I always want to repeat for the record, Explore York Libraries and Archives is an independent mutual organisation. We're a cooperative owned by our staff and our community members, and are here for the public benefit of the residents of York. We have a 15-year contract with yourself to deliver statutory library and archives services. So I always want to start by drawing your attention in the report to the overview of the year in numbers. This is my second year at Explore, blown away by the numbers. So 821,000 physical library visits. So actually I was at a meeting today where the outgoing chair of YMT actually pointed out that it's more visits than they get. And I think I'm trying to pip the National Railway Museum to there. So, you know, that sense of the scale of what we do. I don't want to go through the report again with you, but I thought it might be interesting to at least map the work that we're doing against your core commitments. So in terms of equalities and human rights and opportunities for all, I think it stands to say, you know, we provide a free universal offer to all residents, an opportunity to read, meet, learn, imagine, create and belong, and a place that they feel safe to come to. In terms of children, we provided 1,090 under 5 sessions, the Look, Say, Sing, Play sessions to children that support the development of communication and literacy skills and provide a much needed haven for new parents to actually decompress and share their stories with other parents. We provided 45,657 PEC sessions, so our role in digital inclusion for the city. So that's people being able to come and use our PCs. That's our team actually being able to support people coming to their PCs and how to access forms, access certain websites, to be able to actually participate in what they need to be able to do. 20,943 volunteer hours. So that opportunity for people to come and work with us and develop their own skills and build their confidence. And we have numerous examples of people coming back to us and talking about how they've gained employment, and part of that has been volunteering with us to do that. In terms of affordability, that everyone has the opportunity to benefit from the success of the city, I wanted to showcase our summer reading challenge. So we provide this every year. So in summer 2023, it would have been, we provided over 100 events for children in the city, and they were either free or at very low charge. We were recipient of half funding, and we used that to provide 35 activities over 5 libraries, 348 free places within that, and all of those had food and a meal attached with them. We raised 2/3 of the funding for that event externally. Also, in terms of the opportunity for everyone to benefit, as the great opportunity we provide people to access quality cultural experiences. So partnerships with the National Centre for Early Music, so Baroque Around the Books, where you can turn up just to collect your book and then find some classical musician in the middle of the library playing away. Or my favourite is still the English Touring Opera that come to us twice a year at Acomb. They were there this weekend as well. But that opportunity for residents to access culture near where they are, and again at low cost. 214 school visits carried out. That's us going out to schools to help children understand how to access their libraries and understand how to use their libraries. And that gave basically 15,000 school pupils an understanding of their libraries and what they can do. In terms of climate, we've been working with York University to develop a carbon reduction plan for all our libraries. So providing experience to students, but also us understanding what we need to do to reduce our carbon footprint. As part of our Arts Council funding, we're learning to monitor and measure our carbon footprint using their Julia's bicycle tool. So learning new ways that we can get used to and play our part in that climate thing. But we also have that outward focus, so running events, Acomb participating in the Green Energy Week. We had a partnership with National Trust who came in to provide talks for us. So our role in working with the city to understand the challenges and also think about how they can respond to them. In terms of our archives, we've been working with the National Conservation Service to look at our conservation monitoring systems at York. And we think through that partnership, we can find a way that we can still maintain and look after the archival records, but actually by turning the energy off, which will be good. In terms of health and well-being, we were part of the Family Hub, so we were a pilot place for there. And that was a really positive and it was a great experience actually for us and had a really positive impact. So feedback has shown that it gave access to families that wouldn't normally maybe access the services for the city, but because they were coming into libraries, they had the opportunity to talk to the family navigators and find access to support and services that they wanted. Through our Arts Council, we run creative cafes. So it's part of our wonderful mix of using archives and creatives and communities to build artistic experiences. But again, when we've done evaluation on that over the 8 sessions that participants work with us, they can actually prove that they've had a demonstrable improvement in their level and their impact on mental health. And then I suppose it's just that bit that I wanted to come back to in terms of those swing dance sessions, the reading groups, the chess groups, the adult Lego clubs, the knit and natter. So we run 69 different sessions a month across the city, but provide adults that bit. So, you know, to remove, to provide social responses and provide them that well-being that's just there because they can turn up and have access to their community and their own well-being. In terms of the archives, I talked to you last time about our 20 shipping containers worth of archive, and that sense of the unique nature of the work that we do, both in terms of the management and responsibility for the management and conservation and cataloguing to that archive, but also the work that we do in terms of access and inclusion. So in terms of the management of it, we set up the Setting the Record Straight project. So that's been us implementing a comprehensive review of our collections information, improving, expanding and enriching our online catalogue. It's also carrying out preventative conservation measures for those records to make sure they are there forever in perpetuity for the city. And then using that information to make sure that people have access so they know and we know what records we've got, and then they're catalogued in a way that people can access them. But then also in terms of that outward facing aspect of it about it, we had over 100,000 engagements with the archive. So that's both individuals coming and doing personal engagements, so whether they're going onto Ancestry or they're accessing the catalogue, or whether it's staff mediated, so they're coming into the library and asking questions. But then the different partnerships that we have, so working with local organisations and community groups. So we do Heritage Hunters in partnership with York Museums Trust. We do Roman York in partnership with the York Archaeological Trust. We work with York People First, York Unlocked, the Residents Festival, York Bid, local history groups across York to give them that access. We provide student workshops for both York University and York St John University, whether it's on buildings history for fashion students, medieval history or creative writing, and then offer student placements again for those. So York St John, we had undergraduate history placements, so 4 students were with us over 8 weeks, and University of York had undergraduate volunteer placements where again 4 students were with us for over 8 weeks. So it really is a snapshot. We do huge amounts of stuff, and Mike's right. I will be getting into your inbox our annual review for last year, so you can see all the great things that we do. But just to give you that taster, and more than welcome and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Sure there will be. Questions? Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jenny. That report's really helpful and very positive. It's great to see the improvement, you know, the increase year on year in engagements and all the things you're involved with. And I'm particularly heartened to see it because I wish I'd had your report to hand when I spoke to a resident recently who told me very adamantly that there was no need for libraries anymore. They're a complete waste of time. No one uses them. And I think we've all met people like that at some point in our journeys around the city. So it's a fantastic job, and you and your team are to be commended for this great contribution to our city. My question, though, is actually for Councillor Webb. Please. In January at this meeting, in the context of the attainment gap, I asked if an impact assessment had been conducted on the proposed cuts, and you assured this meeting that an assessment had been completed and that we would get it in the executive papers. we are now December and we haven't seen that yet. So my question is, when can we expect to see that report, please?
I don't remember saying exactly those words, Councillor Knight, so I'd have to follow that one up with you afterwards, after the meeting, for the details regarding the attainment gap in schools. I assume you're talking about the education gap between our, yeah. So obviously that is something that exists within the school environment. I mean, it exists in a lot of places. This is a gap between those who are disadvantaged and those who are more advantaged by poverty in a very unequal city like York. And that's why we've done things like introduce a free skilled meals project, for example, in order to try and support disadvantaged. In relation to how the proposed changes to the library service, and I don't really want to go into anything too detailed there because that's not really my portfolio area at all. I'm struggling to see a direct link, but I'm happy to take it up in detail with you after the meeting if you want any, if we can come to anything further. Thanks.
Thank you. If it helps, Councillor, the recording of the meeting, it's at about 1 hour and 14 minutes that we discussed this, and we were told that the impact assessment had been done and we'd get a copy, but you can have a look at that. It's relevant because the access to all the services that we've heard about to all children across the city, either free or at low cost, any sort of cuts to those services, anything that those children can no longer access. What I wanted to understand from the impact assessment is how that might affect that attainment gap.
I think there's a really interesting question in there about who is accessing our libraries as well. Because what we probably see is actually, and Jenny, you might be able to say more on this, I don't know, but in terms of the demographic of our young people, for example, who are accessing and engaging in libraries, is it our young people who are more advantaged by society and therefore know about our libraries and engage in our libraries and the fantastic work that they're doing? Or is it the young people that it's good to see you're concerned about, who are disadvantaged? Because I think that part of the reason that we end up with a disadvantage gap is because our young people who are disadvantaged by poverty are not accessing the libraries in the same way that those who are advantaged. And so that would be a really interesting thing to look into, to see if there is any evidence there. I'm not suggesting there is, but it's something I think will be interesting to find out about. Regarding changes to anything that's happening at the libraries, as I've said, that's not my portfolio area, and I won't want to comment on the details. I don't think that's fair on Jenny, who sat right here, to be honest. But yeah, that's where I am.
Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Waller.
Thanks, Chair. I think Councillor Webb was, well, typically diplomatic in his response there. I think let's be honest, everyone. Most cuts that have been made in local government have not been wanted to be made. Local authorities are in an absolute mess due to successive governments and their funding policies, including from Councillor Knight's party that got the ball rolling in 2010. Cuts will have impacts, but in local authorities, they are mostly unavoidable, and it's absolutely tragic. So let's just get that out there, whether it's libraries or highway maintenance or social care or whatever. So it's all well and good cherry picking particular causes to try and make a sort of point. But let's look at a bigger picture here. We're city councillors and we have a responsibility to see it all in the round. I do have a question about the report, but I just think that got us off to a really bad start, and I don't think it's fair personally. What I wanted to say initially is thanks for the report. It's clear that there's so much good stuff going on, and I think it's backed up by my own in-person visits and that of my family's. The one in the city centre is brilliant. There's always a good buzz there. Sometimes you get these reports coming through, and I think the gap between the words and the reality is sometimes uncomfortably large. I don't think that's the case here. So I think credit to you and all your team. One thing I'd like to understand, and I know you touched on some challenges in the report regarding archives, but are there any other internal challenges that you can be honest and say that Explore are struggling with or working through? Because every organisation has them all the time. There's always things that you'd like to be better. So aside from all the great stuff, can you not air some of your dirty laundry, but do you get what do you see where I'm coming from? It'd just be interesting to know what other challenges Explore might face aside from all the achievements.
That's a good question. Challenges, I think the challenge that any charitable based organisation is facing at the moment, and I think if you spoke to any single one of my colleagues running a similar organisation would say the same, you know, and you've faced it, the funding environment is very, very difficult. That is across the board, you know, access to grants, access to any kind of funding that way. So that's always a challenge. And the chief executive for a charitable organisation, that always stands there as a challenge. I think beyond that, the challenges would be the normal ones that a chief executive faces every day that I'm not going to wear in public in terms of running an organisation. I think it's really heartening to hear you say that about the report. I think that's the thing that I feel most. And when I did the AGM, my sense of Explore is outwardly it is a beautiful swan and gives that impression of it. Those legs underneath the water are working incredibly hard, but I am so proud of my team and, you know, the commitment that they have. You know, it has me in tears on a regular basis when I sit in a library and see the work that's going on. You know, when we see the work that the archives team are doing, they were ferreting around in a box that they'd found in the basement and whipped out a letter from Queen Victoria, telling off a noble person of York for being a political activist and for causing trouble and trying to put him back in his box. So I think the challenges are there for you know, the environment that you're talking about. All of us are facing a very similar situation, but I would expect that. It's hard, but I can go any day and see what the team are doing and it makes it worthwhile.
Thank you for that. I have no further questions, but I just want to say keep up the great work and I wish you and your team all the best, genuinely, because times are really hard.
Councillor Clark, supplementary.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Jenny, for the report. It's great, impressive as always, and I echo what's been said around the table about the great work that the libraries and the library services are doing. My question is really a kind of supplementary to that, and it was last year you drew attention. I don't know whether it was in this committee or when you were presenting the AGM at the membership meeting. But you mentioned about how the cost of energy and things like that had really impacted on the ability to trade, really, and the money that you were making through the cafes and the ways that you're trying to sort of put yourself on a financial kind of setting, really, sustainability. I'm just wondering whether that has changed or whether you're still feeling those kind of impacts, because I feel like that must be another challenge as well.
It's that bit about inflation, isn't it? They talk about it's gone down to 2%, but it still means it's going up by 2%.
I guess it's in terms of opportunities to trade as well, and what those are presenting.
Yeah, and again, you know, the mirrors, you know, that you're facing as a council are just across the board. So yes, we're finding this year we renegotiated our contracts around energy, and therefore it's settling. It's not going down, unfortunately, which would have been really, really nice. But that's settling, so that feels less of a challenge. But then there are different challenges coming forward. Obviously, we will be impacted by the national insurance changes, so they will have an impact on us. So we need to think about that. In terms of trading, you know, the cost of living, the cost of materials. So for the cafe, The teamwork I sound I'm full of superlatives, aren't they? They do an amazing job, but, you know, the cost of materials, you know, just the cost of coffee, bringing cakes in, and, you know, we work really hard to keep them at a price that for residents, it matches, you know, the locality we're in. You know, we are still making a profit, but it's hard. It's hard work. But again, it is for every single person, I think, out there.
Thank you. Councillor Waller, Councillor Nelson, Councillor Cuthberts.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Jenny for the report. Having visited Eccombe Explore on a regular basis, having the wide range of activities going on there, which draws in all ages, is a delight to see. And at the last meeting, we talked about having more schools bring whole year groups to get them over the threshold, and I was delighted to see the long line coming from Westfield on the 26th, so that familiarisation process is part of what each Explore library sees as its role in the community. Just to get a picture, and officers may wish to come in on this. At last full council, there was the capital report appendix, which mentioned that by the end of 2024, the Eccombe project will be scoped, and in early 2025, reported to executive to sign off for the final vision, business case, and refurbishment plan. So that, I'm just asking, is that on course?
Finance did ask me for an update on that, and that's the current position. So we're working hard in December through to the new year to bring that executive report in spring 25.
Right.
Thank you, Chair. I really enjoyed reading this report, and as someone who is especially currently spending a lot of time in the library, I really, you know, I love our library and all the people that work in it. And I think that you all do such fantastic work. My question's actually not scripted, as you can probably tell, sorry. But my question is perhaps more about the current state of affairs than 23-24. I was wondering if you had any kind of thoughts on the impact of the family hub running out of funding, because things like the Look, Sing, Say, Play, they were all done with the family navigators, I believe. If I'm not, or some of the activity at Eccombe Explores was led by our family navigators, and obviously the libraries and the family hub were working together much more closely. So I was just wondering if there was kind of anything in the pipeline or being looked at about how to kind of fill that gap, because obviously that's one of those really great pieces of work that council's done that has unfortunately kind of hit a financial, you know, the funding one. Sorry, I'm not very good at asking these questions. Maybe I should try scripting that.
Can I provide some clarity, and then I've sort of seen Martin getting the mic, so so our Look, Say, Sing, Play are our activities. So we present them. We do some in partnership with CYC, so we do have some help there, but they are separate to the work that went on with family hubs, and they continue going through. I'll let Martin respond in relation to the family hubs more specifically.
Yeah, so just to be clear, the family hub money was always designed to be a startup funding to bring partners together for them to deliver and to access funding themselves in terms of delivery of activities. So it's great to see that the library is doing that. What I would say is the family hub money hasn't come to an end. Actually, it was in the spending review that there will be a continuation. We won't know what that looks like, as far as I'm aware, until we get to Christmas Day, I suspect.
I suppose what I was really asking, that I did a really poor job of, is what is the future of that kind of that relationship and that activity. So
I think we're keen to see that relationship continue. I think, as Jenny said, the family hub has brought both sides a great deal, I think, and certainly will increase the footfall going into the library by some significant amount, I suspect.
No, I'd agree. It's been, Neil and I meet regularly, and I think it's been a really positive and productive relationship, and just working together in terms of how we can do more and find different ways to do more has been a really positive impact of it.
Brilliant. Thank you. Can I have one other question? My other question was just in terms of, obviously, we've talked about the cafes and the things that you do to generate income. Is there are there things in consideration to kind of help with other types of fundraising, and also that we could support with in terms of other types of fundraising, you know, sponsor a book or fundraising events or things like that? You know, what are the thoughts around gaining extra income from those kind of ways?
So lots of different thoughts in relation to that. So I've over the course of the last year been working with the team in terms of developing their skills. As any of you that have ever done fundraising will know, it's not a natural thing. So we've been working with the team around those, and there have been some really wonderful things that have come out of that. So Councillor Nichols will know in terms of Bishopthorpe, they've done some really good, Sonia there has been really thinking about how to do that and how to raise funds and think about that. Kelly at Strensall worked with her craft team and also got ward funding and got new blinds. So trying to help them think about it in small ways. Then we're working on bigger schemes in terms of what that might look like. And that's about having those conversations and you know, actually talking to people about our needs and how we do that. So we're getting better at making the ask, which I think is part of it. And then we will build on that. It takes time, but you know, we can see it. So at the weekend, we did an ask at the end of the English touring opera, and people were incredibly generous. So we're learning. It's not an easy thing. It's not a natural thing. I've been on courses now, so we're just building that strategy up, and we'll continue to do that. And yes, we will need help. So when we've got that fully formed, I'd love to come back and make that ask.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for all the work that all of your team do.
A murder mystery evening at a library is a good place with a candlestick. Gareth Cuthbertson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Jenny, thank you for that report. Very interesting. You've covered a wide range of activities. Really impressive to see that. I was realising when you mentioned the AGM that I should have declared an interest as a community member of the libraries. I don't think there was anybody else from the council there. Perhaps we might have had an officer, but it was a really, it was an upbeat AGM, and I could guess that it might have been perhaps slightly required a bit of effort to be upbeat in the circumstances, but it's good that you've been able to give a very positive report. Can I just look at one or two bits of the report? On page 40, in the middle section, you talk about explore funds most of the summer reading challenge activities through external grants and partnerships. I gathered that you were talking about, if you like, local fundraising there. What I'm interested in is the state of the external grant arrangements and the situation that's happened between 23-24 and 24-25. If you could explain a little bit about that, that'd be really good.
I'll see what I can do. So in terms of summer reading challenge last year, because that's what I've done my prep for, in terms of the external funding, and we provide the report and we provide it as part of it. I think they're all listed in there, but we, in terms of funding, New Year's Wit Residents Forum, Derwentthorpe Community Trust, the HAF programme, we got, and some ward funding, so those supported those. In terms of the summer reading challenge this year just gone, I haven't got the figures to hand, but I know Lindsay did a fantastic job again of fundraising, and that again in terms of accessing different funds. So I think again 80% of the summer reading challenge and all the events was through different sort of funding opportunities. We do work really closely with the team in terms of HAF funding, and that's been really positive, and I think we've also done ward funding around it. But next year I can answer your question.
Okay, thank you. I think my broad thrust of my question was aimed at general grant fundraising from external organisations outside the city, where you might have an open applications process, and it may be that supporting the Explore activities is appropriate fund to fund. But I don't know whether that's continuing or not.
Yeah, I think we're constantly looking. I think the challenge anyone has when they're looking at grant funding is invariably these days grant funding is asking you to do extra or to do something new and something different. And I think I've demonstrated that the current what we do at the moment, there is an awful lot there. But yeah, we've got 2 or 3 projects with partners in the pipeline that are looking at that sort of external funding.
Thank you. A couple of minor points for later on in the report. On pages 45 or 45, you talk about the installation of digital processing PC and associated ingest software. And the ingest, that word ingest is on the next line. I would assume it's the taking on board of historic information into a computer system. Otherwise, the word ingest has entirely different connotations for me.
Yes, the technical terms, isn't it? And I haven't got Julianne here to answer it, but yes, ingest is taking digital material in. And why they're ingesting, not digesting, I've no idea. But yes, it's ingesting material.
I'll remember to use that in future. And the other point was your mention of the state of films that haven't been but are now being conserved. So you particularly mention undocumented cellulose nitrate and acetate negative films. Certainly one of those I know to be potentially dangerous. I just wondered if you'd could elaborate on that, whether particular difficulties in, if you like, putting it into a readable condition or what.
They're really stepping outside of my technical expertise here. So yes, so at any one time, so people over the course of time, archives get put into boxes. As we've gone through the Setting the Record Straight project, we are opening some of those boxes. So there would be in a very top level catalogue. If you imagine just somebody writing on an A4 sheet what's in the box, and we've opened the boxes and there has been film in there, and cellulose nitrate has potential risk to be flammable. Which you don't want in an archive for all sorts of reasons. What we've done, I mean, the team are incredibly professional, so they've dealt with those and they've taken the appropriate advice. What we've done as part of looking at how we do things is subscribe to something called the National Conservation Service. So we've now got on the phone access to professional conservators. So rather than having to hit these things and then find conservators and pay conservators, we've got a regular access to the person and phone a friend at the end of the line. They've been incredibly helpful at talking us through. So the team have now been trained up. So when they come across boxes with film in it, they can actually now work out what kind of film it is, what the risk is it, and what they need to do in order to conserve it. So we're in a much better position now in relation to that. There are things that you can do to change the way that or how you record the information that was on the film. If you want that detail, I'll let you bring Julianne back next time.
Not for the moment. Thank you for your helpful answers.
Thank you. Councillor Colwick.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Right at the end, you mentioned the second year of delivery under the MPO programme. The opening of New Clifton Library and the celebrations of the 10 years as Explore Libraries and Archives. Congratulations. Can I add to that? Congratulations to Huntington Explore, having very recently celebrated its 60th anniversary, and it was a great pleasure to join the celebrations there. For all of it that you've outlined here and the very useful figures, the thing which I think left me with more questions was just the references to the archive and sort of legacy issues. Maybe others around the table have been aware of that. I haven't. So can you say a little more about what these legacy challenges are?
That can, and I think the first thing to say is that if you manage any collection, so whether it's a museum's collection or an archives collection, there are always legacy issues, because in effect, huge amounts of collections come in and the time it takes to process them, and things have gone through. So there is a significant collection, and over time there have been different innovations in how to catalogue and manage records. And what's coming with the team now is that some of those new modern, the ways that at the time were considered to be new and modern and would revolutionise the way that we catalogue, weren't actually as helpful as they should be. And you go back to your traditional methods of actually there is no shortcut to proper cataloguing. So in effect, those legacy issues are over time, as the archive has moved locations, and I don't have the full history, but I think the archive has moved locations, hasn't it, across the city. Each successive move, there has been a way of moving the archive, which has created challenges in the way that's happened. Then there has been different ways of cataloguing or experiments with cataloguing that were seen to be more efficient and maybe to get better through the backlog, and they haven't necessarily worked that well, which have then meant that the team now are addressing those. So we've gone right back to step one, which is you start on the premises of we're now going to open every single box, and we're going to make sure that we know what's in it. We're going to make sure it's catalogued correctly. We're going to make sure we understand it, and then build that record up. So that's the process. So the legacy issues are fairly usual in any kind of collection. What I'm really proud of the team in terms of what they're doing is that bit about admitting it and saying, right, we've got these issues, we need to address them, and then putting in place incredibly thorough and efficient systems that are going to address that. It'll take time because it's a large archive, but over time they will then address those and will put the archive in an incredibly positive position.
Thank you. And you refer here to some of the collection being damaged. How extensive is that?
I think it's linked to a city that apparently floods every now and again. At various points, I think the archive have been held in basements, and my understanding is basements in York aren't a particularly good place to store archives. So they've been rescued, and we're just addressing those. I promise you there are no more archives in basements.
It does sound an enormous challenge and enormously time consuming. Do you also have any volunteers involved in this archiving?
We do. We have 2 regulars who've been helping us for years and are incredibly valuable. And then we've recently gone through a recruitment programme and we're working on placements. There's obviously a lot of skill in sort of cataloguing it. So we went out to recruit, I think 8 or 9 volunteers. We got 30 applicants, I think, so it was incredibly popular. And that team now are in and trained, and they will do a placement with us and do a certain amount of work. And then they will finish, the team will get on with some of the other stuff and then prepare the next tranche, and we'll go through it again.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going back to each and just environmental, because I think there was some discussion last year about maybe an audit of buildings being done and how you can make them more energy efficient. I'm not sure if I'm correct in that, and whether there's just in terms of like funding, capital funding that might be available to do that, because I think there might be some on offer as it is, or whether that's been explored.
Yes, there have been various projects, and I work really closely with Andy in terms of what kind of things are coming up in terms of the buildings to do it. I think you're always going to come back to our main library as an 18th century building, and I've got 15 years experience with the National Trust. Making 18th century buildings sustainable is a massive challenge, and that's the one that we're constantly looking at in terms of working at it. There are no easy answers. You can't do heat source pumps because you've got archaeology below us. You can't put anything on the roof because you've got a climate control system for archives. We are constantly looking. There were some plans put in place. From what I can manage with the Explore one, in effect, it said that's tricky, isn't it? Because it's an 18th century building.
So just to come back, so there isn't a plan in place as such. So that was it an audit that was going to be taking place, or was it just some
Some
Just to-
audits,
just to look
some
at it,
audits
basically.
did go through, and we're working through those. But again, it comes back to capital and the investment. We're doing the bits that we can do and looking for grants as and when they come up.
All right, clear. Thank you.
No more? Oh, Councillor Kilbane.
Just in case you moved on, Chair, I just wanted to thank the committee for the ideas, discussions that have come forward tonight. Thank the officers for the report, Pauline, Andy and the team. But above all, thank Jenny and her team at Explore, who do a fantastic job for the city. And I think, you know, it is going to the library fairly often and going in the other day and just finding it alive, you know, kids everywhere, and that thing about parents decompressing in a library. I've been in there, absolutely having a mad day in town. It's just like, oh, I just need to go into the library. So, you know, really greatly appreciated. And if you can certainly just want it on record from this committee, our thanks to you and the team for all that you do for the city.
There you go. Can I get better than that, Jenny? Thank you. Much appreciated. We'll let the sweets go past first. Sorry. Welcome, Danielle, Michael and Martin. We are talking sufficiency strategy.
Yes, evening. So sufficiency strategy. So this is the final draft of our sufficiency strategy document and has been approved through the senior leadership team and directors management team. The sufficiency strategy details how the City of York Council intends to meet its responsibilities in relation to its sufficiency duty, and that's set out in the Children Act 1989. It is a requirement for us to have a plan about how we're going to provide a range of homes for children and young people. It's informed by our current resources and anticipated sufficiency requirements, and it takes into consideration some of the national trends and themes as well as what is happening for us locally here in the City of York. This strategy prioritises children's needs, and it helps us to plan for the future by anticipating what our needs and challenges will be. It also promotes accountability, transparency, and encourages collaboration between all key partners, something that we've been working really hard on and which is beginning to be evidenced through a number of key achievements that we have made to date. And I think working with our colleagues in housing has been a really good example of this. From the very beginning of our strategy, we're clear about our vision in line with our Building Brighter Futures model, in that children remaining with their families and being part of a connected network must always be our starting and our ending point. However, where our assessment tells us that children need to be looked after for whatever reason for a period of time, it sets out our vision and approach to meeting our responsibilities to provide secure, safe and appropriate accommodation to children in need, children in care and care leavers over the next 3 years. The main outcomes of our strategy are that we will strive to safely reduce the rising numbers of children and young people who are looked after, increase the number of children and young people supported to live safely with their families or their connected networks and in their communities. We will reduce our reliance on services away from children's networks and communities where these are not in the best interest of the child or the young person. We will seek to increase the numbers of kinship and foster carers, as well as developing our local residential services to meet the needs of children with more complex needs. We will also improve the way that we commission services and increase our accommodation options for young people leaving care, as well as designing and developing accommodation and support for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children in York. So this document really sets out how we will deliver on our strategy, such as developing our Together We Can model, undertaking a full review of our fostering services, having a clear fostering strategy and recruitment strategy, and developing our accommodation and support offer to unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, as well as embedding our Staying Close offer for young people who are leaving care. The success of the sufficiency strategy will be measured against our 3 meaningful outcomes, which is stay home, come home, and being safe and connected. And the document goes on to provide both national and local data that helps to put York into context and to understand our local picture and how we compare against our neighbours. We've also ensured that feedback from young people in relation to what they want to see in our foster care and residential offer is clearly represented, and you can see that within the document. And as previously mentioned, there is an ongoing review of fostering, and we have linked in with the Show Me That I Matter group of young people to involve them in further design and development of our website and foster carer profiles and our broader advertising strategy. So this sufficiency strategy really is to provide you with a broad overview of our plan and our approach, and the details of how we deliver this is all contained within our individual plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Good report. Questions? Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report. I just was interested in placement stability in particular. And page 67, there's a sentence at the top which I've read it 2 or 3 times, and I'm just trying to sort of get it fixed in my head to make sense of it. So it says that placement stability has decreased. So presumably it means that placement breakdowns are increasing over the past 18 months. And then it says this reflects an active choice through the Make York Home programme to ensure children are in placements that best meet their needs, which I absolutely think is the right thing to be doing. But you would have thought that would mean that placement stability would be improving rather than reducing. And then it says that there are continued challenges around availability of suitable placements, which would completely make sense that placement breakdowns were increasing if there was insufficient suitable places. So I just kind of wanted to understand, am I correct that essentially it's the lack of suitable places that's causing the increase in breakdowns, but that within the placements, we're trying as much as we possibly can to make sure that people are in the best possible settings to ensure that the placements are meeting their needs?
So there are a number of key factors. We are measured on our placement stability, whether children and young people have 3 or more moves, and that's our KPI that we work to. For some of those young people, there may be positive moves in those statistics. So where we are, for example, supporting young people to return to York and to be closer to their families and connected networks, that may increase our placement instability. So it kind of looks negative, but actually for the children and young people, it's a very positive thing. There are other complicating factors in our placement stability. So, for example, children who are born and are in hospital, that's counted as a placement. Yes, counted as a placement. So if they move to a temporary foster care arrangement before then moving into a longer term placement, then that counts as 3 moves. So there are lots of kind of variables in relation to that. We are doing a piece of work separately on placement stability because we have recognised the need to have more overview and scrutiny of that.
If I may, so that's really helpful. Sorry, Martin, did you want to add something before I ask? So,
Yeah, I think just very quickly to add that a child going home is also another placement. So it sort of stacks up, isn't necessarily a useful measure. I think the other thing is to talk about maybe some of the young people that end up in residential care. We can place a child in a residential home that we're paying £750,000 for. And that child may remain there. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right place for them to be.
Absolutely.
And therefore it would be seen as a placement stability, getting that placement stability right. But actually what we should be doing is making sure that we try really hard to get that child amongst their family network with the foster care and make sure that they're local. Sometimes that takes time to get it right. So you might have a child that moves on for a few different placements, but it's the right thing to do. So it's not something that really is a good statistics count, to be honest, in terms of young people's outcomes.
I mean, I suppose in a way, you've partly answered part of my question in the sense of, you know, whether 3 or more moves is a helpful or not measure. Perhaps the longevity of the placement is another measure that would be an indicator, because I think essentially what we're trying to drive at, and I think I'm sure everybody is aiming for this, is that, you know, ideally you want people in placements that are stable and suitable and work to the best interest of the children and young people. And I suppose what I'm trying to understand from the statistics is where we think we are as a local authority in trying to achieve that outcome.
So I think, I mean, on the next page, it obviously shows that we're broadly consistent with the national picture and the sort of statistical neighbours as well. But I guess just to add, I think in the very short term, you know, we used to have something called bridging placement. So where you would put a child in a placement that you know isn't going to be the permanent placement, but it was until you could find the right family to put the child in. And again, we I think historically jumped to, let's just find a placement, doesn't matter whether it's in Birmingham, Liverpool, Blackpool. We found a placement rather than thinking about actually what's the long-term needs of a child, which isn't just about placements, actually, it's about how well connected they are and when they're 30, 40 and 50. So you're likely to, you know, there will be young people that we take some time getting it right for, because we're trying to keep them in the city rather than go straight to an independent fostering agency. So the short-term pain, if you like, is worth the long-term gain in terms of the young person remaining in the city well connected. Still not sure whether.
Well, so I understand all of that, and that all makes sense. I still don't necessarily have a sense of where we are as a local authority in terms of, do we feel that we are meeting that aspiration to ensure that, you know, as much as we possibly can, and what I suppose are the barriers, you know, separate from that? Because I hear in terms of what you're saying, in terms of, you know, I suppose you can cut statistics in all sorts of different ways, and you can build a narrative around it. And I suppose what we as a committee are going to be most interested in are, you know, that overall aspiration to be in a secure, safe place that works for the children and young people. You know, to what extent are we confident that we're delivering that as best as we possibly can as a local authority, and what are the things that, you know, we want to be doing or can be doing to try to drive that as far as forward as we can.
So I think that there is more that we can do, and part of the strategy is all about that, in terms of making sure that we increase our availability of resources in terms of foster care in the city. So one of the challenges is, you know, we've historically we've had very low numbers of foster carers coming into the city, or not coming into the city, but becoming foster carers. Michael alluded to another document that will hopefully come here. I think, don't know whether you've had the conversation, Bob, but hopefully come in January, which will be a huge amount of work that's been done alongside foster carers to review the whole fostering system that we have in York. We pay very poorly for new foster carers. We pay extremely advantageously for those that have been foster carers for a long time. So we need to make sure that we can bring foster carers in who want to be fostering young people in the city. I think the difficulty at the moment, and nationally, not just in York, for every place that you have available, you've probably got 30 children that want it or need it. So there is a huge sufficiency issue nationally. What we're trying to do is, alongside of this, it's all about the recruitment campaign that we need to develop or are developing, have developed, making sure that we increase our pool of foster carers in the city, so that we're not just perhaps finding that bridging placement, we're finding the right placement first time for young people. But actually, we're also really committed to making sure that young people are going back to their family network. So fostering was only ever designed to be a temporary arrangement. It was never designed to be a permanent arrangement for children. Only adoption manages to achieve that. We've sort of moved as a country to a degree to using foster care as a sort of long-term option. We're trying to move back to making sure that it is an arrangement that supports children for a period of time until they can be back within their family network where possible. So what can we do more, I think, Johnny, is to get to your point, is we can recruit more foster carers, as well as using more family members and making sure that extended family networks can support young people. We've got, I think, around about 45% of our foster, so 45% of our children that are in foster care are living with their family members as kinship carers, which is phenomenal. Actually, that's a really successful result for, that would be much higher than most of the country, I think.
Councillor Nelson.
Since you were talking about recruitment of foster carers, and that was what my question was actually about. Thank you for this report as well, and congratulations on the opening of Wenlock Terrace and the kind of moving towards those models. I think it's really, really great to see us investing in that sort of stuff as a city. The one thing when you're talking about placement sufficiency that I sort of can't find in this report is, where are we at in terms of, if you were to make a ballpark figure, do we have 70% of the foster carers on our books that we'd like to have, or 40, or, obviously every individual case is different, but actually you've been doing foster care recruitment and putting a lot of effort into that, and I'm sure there will be another set of work after the report comes out. Where are we at with our actual sufficiency of foster carers on our books?
So there's been a huge amount of work being undertaken in the last 11 months, and as Martin alluded to, documents will be coming your way for you to scrutinise and ask questions around. We've got a very ambitious recruitment strategy for fostering. We aim to recruit 50 net gain new carers over the next 5 years. We've invested a lot into developing a digital marketing platform, which will probably mean more to some people around this table than me in terms of how it works. But also the work we've done around our fostering framework and the fees that we are proposing to pay, as well as our new website, which you haven't seen yet, but it's on its way. So we have got some fairly ambitious targets there. We'll always see foster carers coming and going. Sometimes it's a choice for a period of time. We've got foster carers who have been fostering in York for 30 plus years. But it's about making sure that we get our model right. So 50 new carers net gain over the next 5 years, as well as developing our kinship offer. And we mustn't forget that. I mean, it's as Martin said, the percentage of kinship carers, which are family and friend foster carers, is so high in York in comparison to many other local authorities. And I think, if our ambition is to keep children and young people safely with their families and their connected networks, then equally we need to be investing in kinship care.
So just to kind of clarify to an extent, so if the plan is, or the aim would be 50 new foster carers in the next 5 years, which sounds great, is that we are currently, in your opinion, sort of 50 foster carers short, or are we in a place at the moment where we're kind of just about managing, but really need a bit of extra room? Or would that 50 put us at the just about managing? I hope that makes sense. In terms of like, are we, when you're looking at the foster carers that we have and the need that we have, how are they marrying up now?
So recruiting another 50 net gain foster carers will put us slightly ahead of where we need to be. We know that we're going to be challenged. There is a rising number of children coming into care, and there is a decreasing population of foster carers. We're also seeing an increase in the numbers of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children that we also need to support, and rightly so. So that extra 50 net gain will put us slightly ahead of the curve where we need to be, but it's going to be a continual process because we have to accommodate people who decide to leave, retire, etc.
Thank you.
Right, got Councillor Waller, Councillor Wilson, and then Councillor Nelson with a question. Oh, you've done now. Okay. Councillor Waller, then, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to thank officers for a detailed report, and I recognise the amount of effort that goes into supporting existing foster carers. I've been to lots of meetings in this room where that amount of work to recognise the decades of work that's been done, and Danielle doesn't miss the opportunity to encourage people to think about becoming foster carers. It's understanding how you worked to ensure that kinship carers, that aspect of it is growing, with a backdrop over recent years of there being a national government view which hasn't been entirely favourable towards in-house local authority provision where it's needed, and there being some circumstances where there's a commercial interest which isn't providing you with options that satisfy the requirement, that where you have nowhere else to go, that at least you know you have the confidence that they're going to somewhere that you have the confidence in. So it's understanding what changes are happening now to ensure that the right options that help you to ensure that the child has the best long-term placement to be, that what's happening now that will help you to deliver this programme and to have a insurance that those other players are taken out of the system. I think it's something I discussed with Martin.
I'll just come in on the first bit around kinship carers, and what we're doing in relation to that. And I think that very much sits at the heart of our practice model, and our work with partners, whereby at the earliest opportunity that we're working with not just parents and their children, but their wider network and the community, so that we're seeing that's just the way that we work, putting families at the heart of what we do, enabling them to find the solutions. They are often there. It's us enabling them to do that. So that is very much a part of our practice model. And as Martin has suggested, I think we should celebrate how, the numbers of children that we are able to support in kinship arrangements. We know that there's a huge amount of evidence there to tell us that children do better when they're with their families, and that is supported nationally by the new kinship guidance. In relation to independent fostering agencies and external provision, there's been an awful lot of conversation around the cost of that, around people profiteering from that, which is a concern to all of us. There has been a new policy paper that has been released just last week that is aiming to work to tackle some of that, but I think it will be certainly a challenge. But they are looking at measures to be put in place for that to be tackled on a national basis, which will support us. But for us in York, I think what's important is that the support and the community that we can provide to our carers that can't always be provided by those independent agencies, the things that we can do differently to make people feel that they're part of something, that they're part of a community, and very much part of this city, raising our children and supporting our families.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Nelson asked most of what I was going to ask about recruiting foster carers and how many you felt that we needed. Obviously taking into account what you've just said about kinship carers, but I was just wondering, so having seen lots of the adverts and lots of the work that you've been doing and recognising that you're going to make changes, but I was just wondering how successful it is at the moment at recruiting new foster carers, and how many new foster carers at the moment we're recruiting each year. Do you have those sorts of figures?
I don't have the detailed figures in my head. What I can tell you about the recruitment of foster carers is that when you start a process with people who've expressed an interest to foster, it can take between 3 and 4 months to get them to the point of approval through panel. So what we're seeing this year is a lot of our earlier work is starting to come into fruition. So we've got fairly busy panels as we head into December, January and February because of some of that earlier work. And that's really just been on the basis of what we've been doing locally. And I'm really glad that you have seen some of the stuff in and around York. Because we've put a lot of effort into the advertising, but really we are behind. If you look at independent fostering agencies and our colleagues in other local authorities, they are streets ahead in terms of things like their website and their digital marketing campaign and the ability to reach out to communities in such a we live in a different age from when I was a youngster. So I think added that on in the new year, I think we'll see an increased activity and we're ready for that really.
Thanks. And just a quick supplementary, if I may, I just wondered, given cost of living and the fact that York is a really expensive city to live in, is whether you find people coming forward to become foster carers and actually are put off by, I know Martin mentioned that longer term or more experienced foster carers get more, but newer foster carers, there isn't that level of financial support possibly. I was just wondering if between you've noticed whether that has put people off progressing further with the process.
Absolutely, and it's initiated quite a big piece of work actually looking at our fostering framework and our fee structure. If we compare ourselves to 11 or 12 neighbouring and regional authorities, we were the worst paying authority for entry level for foster carers at £65. And as Martin alluded to, we were the best or second best. I'll not name who the best was, but second best, very close in terms of our highest paid carer. So there was huge kind of disparity there. So we couldn't get people interested in fostering because we paid so poorly. And yet when we had foster carers, they were all moving up to the top fee paying level. So we've really had to think differently about our framework. So you will see a paper coming your way in terms of a proposed fee structure, which is much fairer, much more attractive. And I think absolutely will encourage people to think again about fostering.
Hold on. Councillor Webb wants to answer. Do you want to wait for the supplementaries before you answer? Yeah. Councillor Nelson and Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, thank you. Thanks, Chair. Just a really specific question about that. I'd imagine one of the big challenges we also have as a city is the cost of living means that not that many people have an extra room. or, you know, necessarily like the physical space to foster, even if they wanted to. Within our sort of council tenants who perhaps have a child that's left home and perhaps are being penalised by the bedroom tax and things like that, is there any sort of link between one and the other in terms of potentially, you know, we have council tenants who, due to changes in family circumstances, may end up with an extra space, but then are penalised through the kind of, you know, national systems when that happens. Is there any kind of linking together, or even just sort of basic initial conversations? Would this be interest? Your circumstances have changed. Did you know about this whole thing? Or would that be something that we could look at, or it might be worth looking at?
I don't think with that targeted, I think it's a good idea, to be honest, in terms of trying to make the links. What we do in terms of all our advertising is we're trying to get to a broad target audience. You know, at the moment we're trying to really target Haxby Wigginton, in the fact that it's got a high street that has many businesses, and lots of research and evidence to show that in terms of advertising, you need to see something, I think it's 11 3/4 times before you'll engage in thinking about it. So we want to almost, you should see lots of posters in Haxby and Wigginton at the moment. We've been working with a digital company who we've just about commissioned, I think, and been through procurement, who will be doing very targeted work for us in terms of digital advertising. We are, you know, we're definitely targeting the empty nest syndrome, you know, where families have got young people that have moved on to university, although they often pop back on a regular basis, from personal experience. And you're not really completely sure when they've actually sort of left. So, but I think there's certainly something about, you know, we've definitely had some advertising in the past around the fact that if you have an empty room and that's costing you money, then here's an opportunity to make that room work for you. So there's all aspects of advertising, I think, that are really targeting. But I think we'll think about having a conversation with housing as well, whether we can make some sort of connection there.
It just seems, you know, we're big, we forget sometimes that there are more opportunities to link all the different knowledge that we have within the council.
And just to take the opportunity whilst I've got Mike, just because I've got to leave. But it'd be fantastic if we have got some posters for members that are spending a lot of time with the public, front facing. If you want a whole load of leaflets to hand across to businesses and various other places, very welcome to have as many as you want.
T-shirts, any T-shirts?
Work on it, I'm sure.
Right. Sorry, before Councillor Taylor, Martin, please leave.
Yes, I'm going.
Might be no spare room. Right, Councillor Taylor and Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. Just a supplementary, regarding the review of the payments you've mentioned. And I'm completely ignorant to how this works. I'm assuming you say it's going to be fairer, so it'll probably be more attractive to newcomers than it currently is. I'm guessing there's trade-offs involved in that. Is there any possibility that it might put off people who are already fostering and higher up the sort of payment ladder who might be brought down? Do you see where I'm coming from? By reducing the overall gap, or is that just not a thing?
It's a thing, but it's a long-term thing. So again, without going into too much detail about the paper that is yet to be circulated, there is a very clear roadmap there and a plan. If anything, everybody's payments will be going up. The proposal is that everybody's payments will be going up because we want to reward, we want to retain, we want to recognise the commitment that our foster carers make every day with our most vulnerable children and young people. And we've put forward some recommendations to offset and mitigate that additional costs. The issue isn't about how much we pay per se at the top. of our fee structure. It's about how many people sit in that seat, in that space. And at the moment, about 88% of all of our mainstream foster carers sit in that space, which is really unusual. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the country, really. Most all local authorities have capped skill levels to manage their sufficiency. And it's something that we haven't done particularly well, but something that we're committed to putting right, and having a fair and equitable framework for our foster carers.
Thank you.
Councillor Caution.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions if that's all right. And just while we're talking about payments, I'm sure that this will be the case. I'm still really kind of almost haunted really by when I used to be on Show Me That I'm at 5, 6, 7 years ago. And there was a recruitment drive, I think was actually nationally, and a young person had come into a meeting, had heard on the radio of the taxi that she was in about how much money people could make from being foster carers, and was absolutely devastated that she thought that the only reason why the people were fostering her was to be, a business. And it's a really delicate balance, isn't it, between trying to encourage people to become foster carers and demonstrating that it's something that you can be supported to do versus, certainly the older young people who may well see and hear and see the adverts and draw their own inferences from it. So it's just an observation. I'm sure that we do, consider that. Just in terms of a couple of questions, and just right on cue, my laptop has switched itself off or not switched itself off, locked myself out. My question, so I won't be able to phrase it quite as it was, but it was just about the what's happening with placements that are local authority placements that are in York and then that are outside of the local authority area. And I think, sorry, I'm not going to be able to tell you exactly what the question framing was, but it was, I think if I remember rightly, that the placements in local authority placements were staying stable, but the overall number of placements in York itself were going down, or the percentage was going down, which I read to mean that we were placing probably more children and young people outside of area. Is that a correct understanding of sort of what's going on in terms of that?
So we have had a slight increase, and when I say slight, it's a small number of children when we work that out, who are placed outside of the area. We will always have some young people who are for a number of different reasons. I think what's important to factor in is it's around 35–40% of that cohort are placed either in an adoptive placement, or they're placed with their family externally out of the area. So we do monitor that really, really closely to understand it. Because if we see a slight increase, which might look, oh, that's maybe a worry, it maybe isn't. If they're placed with their family and that's our first option, but they're outside of the area. So it has increased slightly by a small number of children. I think it's important to factor in quite a big proportion of those children are placed where we would want them to be.
Thank you. I mean, that was sort of going to be my secondary question really on that. And I guess it is that case. We've certainly talked previously at this committee about, one or two families at times can skew the statistics, quite a lot. So it's really helpful to have that narrative. My other question, if it's okay, slightly different, and I suppose I want to ask this both in relation to children and young people generally, who are coming into the care system, and then also particularly unaccompanied asylum seeker children. And I just wondered if you could talk to us at all about the relationships between, say, the schools in the city and some of the other kind of institutions that will be currently or become incredibly important for that kind of stability. I'm thinking particularly about, where you have got children who perhaps have got complex things going on at home that's caused them to have to come into the care system, and that connection with their current school or their current social network can be so important to things. But schools themselves are also struggling with their resources to be able to deal with complex need and all of that. And it's just what that interaction is like between, you know, us as a local authority and the schools in the city in terms of trying to work together to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support the young people.
Yeah, I think we're well engaged with these schools. Part of these strategies just talk about belonging for children and young people. That's not just belonging within their family and network, as you rightly point out. That's, you know, that feeling of belonging in community and within their education, so they can be supported to learn. And for our children and young people, school is really, really important for numerous reasons that I don't that you will know about. So I think we are well engaged with schools. Our virtual school head absolutely supports that and supports us with that role. I think that's the stability that we've now got across the service, particularly around our staffing, the work that we've done on our practice model, in terms of the way in which we want to work with children and young people, which we have worked with schools as part of the partnership work. The early help strategy all comes together as part of in terms of a system working in the same way to support our children and young people. And yes, we do have children and young people that we're working with where they do have complex needs. I'd say that we're well engaged with that, and I think that individual practitioners do work really hard to build those relationships. Having the stability in the staffing group has really helped with that. As we know previously, that was a challenge for us, but I think we've moved on.
Councillor Cuthbertson, and then we'll have a round up from Councillor Webb.
Thank you. So very quick one, Chair. Page 60, Michael. Thank you for the report, by the way. Covers a suitably wide range of possibilities and plans for the future. On page 40, the top left item, deliver our new together we can model. There are 3 bullet points underneath that. And I'm just wondering when the report was written and if I've missed something. So, page 60, did I say? Assuming that the first bullet point of registering at Wenlock and Oostcliff has been dealt with, but it's the other 2.
Yeah,
sorry, Danielle.
Yeah, sorry. Absolutely, the registering of and opening of Wenlock Terrace and Oostcliff House, they are registered now with Ofsted. We have got recruitment and been successful in the recruitment of the clinical psychologist, which is positive. And we're working on the speech and language therapists. So yeah.
Well, speech and language therapists are in a bit of a short supply at the moment.
Very much so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Before you get to Councillor Clark, before he sits down.
Sorry, Bob. Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just about unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and mention of building a little bit of capacity in this strategy, and it kind of links back a little bit to the finance performance report, in the sense that at the moment we've got a much lower number of those children than might be expected for a city of this size. I'm just wondering the capacity that we're building within this particular document aligns with what we're expecting the numbers to increase to, because you know there's quite a significant difference between under 10 to over 30. I'm just wondering whether we're on track to sort of meet what the expectation might be.
Yeah, so we have opened up a supported accommodation provision in Folkswood, and we have 4 delightful young people who have moved into that home in the last few weeks and are doing extraordinarily well. We are planning to repeat the same kind of model in 2025. So we are doing some provisional planning around that. We've also linked in with the interfaith group as well as the imam at the local mosque to do some work with our diverse communities around doing some targeted recruitment for foster carers who can provide care and support to unaccompanied asylum seeking children in their homes. So yes, we're on track. We're actually slightly ahead actually. In developing the service in Foxwood, we worked closely with Migration Yorkshire. So in terms of the tranche allocation, York is sitting ahead. So we miss out on the next couple of allocations because we were able to take 4 young people all at the same time. So yeah, it's looking positive.
Thank you.
Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Chair. I think, you know, we should be incredibly proud of how we're supporting young people in this city. It's not always perfect, of course, it's not. It's a really complex issue, but I think the work that officers are doing is absolutely fantastic. And I think just to pick up on that last point that Michael said, you know, it's not just council officers, but it's also our communities as well that are reaching out and supporting, and it's those foster carers that are doing a fantastic job as well. And I think that the whole point of this is to make sure that we've got children who are in safe and stable placements that are healthy and good for them and do the best they can. As part of that, I mean, we talked about the link with schools earlier on. Councillor Crawshaw mentioned that, and the fact that we've changed the number of agency social workers from 46 at one point, I mean, I've got my right number, down to 0, is a real big improvement, because that stability is a massively important thing. And as I said, it is a complex area. There's been a lot in the press recently about external placements and the fact that, quite frankly, that in some places they can be extortionate. And I'm really glad that the new government has sort of started to talk about limiting that profiteering a bit, because I think it's something that it doesn't help our authority. We look at the overspends we talked about earlier on, and that's contributing to that, and it doesn't help those young people either. So I'm really glad that there's positive moves there. I think the thing I'll finish with is what I was going to leave until the work plan, but I might as well say now, is a formal request that the fostering strategy report comes to this committee in January. Because, I mean, to be honest, guys, you've all pretty much asked all the questions you're probably going to ask for that anyway, but you should probably see the paper first. Because it is clear that is something that needs to change, and that's something that needs to improve. That's not to say the work that our current foster carers are doing isn't fantastic, because it is. But we need more of that. And if any of the millions who are watching at home, or indeed if it's, you know, Councillor Knight tracking me in another 6-9 months' time, then please go to fostering.york.gov.uk to learn a little bit more and think about how you might get involved and how you could become a foster carer yourself, because I think it's all about supporting these wonderful young people, but it's also about remembering that every one of those wonderful young people is entirely unique. And has a completely individual circumstance that they need support with to help them, which is why I'll be honest, I think sometimes when we see the statistics around some of this, it can be really confusing, because what can be really positive for one young person can be really negative for another. And I think that's something where that's why the narrative's so important around this, and why I'm really happy that we've had a really good, healthy debate and discussion. And good questions. So yeah, thanks everybody, and thanks to everything that officers are doing. It's really positive work.
Thank you. Look forward to your report coming. Thanks very much. So we'll look forward to your report coming.
Thanks.
Thank you. See you in January. Neil? You want to chuck that sending down? You want to chuck? Over to you.
So, yes, save the best till last. So I'm really pleased to come and join you this evening and present to you the Corporate Parenting Board Annual Report for 2023-24. And probably need to start with a little bit of expectation management as well, in the sense that you'll note from the annual report, it's a very active board. It has subgroups. It covers a really broad range of activity. So each of which could be its own scrutiny item in its own right. So I'm just caveating, if there's questions I don't know the detail to, we'll do the best between us that we can. But it's just to manage that. The Corporate Parenting Board, it is and has been an absolutely key feature of the way that we work and discharge our responsibilities as corporate parents for years. But in particular, we've had a real drive and a real focus in recent years about strengthening those arrangements, and in particular about young people's involvement. So the first thing I'd want to draw your attention to within the report is the foreword of the annual report, which is written by Care Experienced Young People, Lauren and Owen, and I think they speak far better than I about what they can see about the impact and the difference that the Corporate Parenting Board is making. I'd also highlight our Corporate Parenting Advisors model, which has been going for a number of years now and is now established on a permanent basis, and has really added to that value of working with care experienced people to understand their experience and work collectively with them to improve how we work. The report itself is structured around the corporate parenting strategy and the themes and the priorities that identifies. That was signed off earlier this year. So just by way of reminder, that covers where you live. Just had a really rich and helpful conversation in relation to sufficiency. The other areas are around family and friends, around education. And I'm aware that the Virtual School Head annual report came to this committee in October. Health, support into adulthood, and what I'm sure you'll also be very interested in, us being good corporate parents. So whilst the report covers the period for 2023-24, paragraph 5 in the covering report does allude to some of the activity that's already happened already this year, and that there's more that will come beyond that will be reflected in next year's annual report. So before I sort of turn it over for any questions or comments, I would also just draw your attention to paragraph 14. So just recently, the government has published Keeping Children Safe, Helping Families Thrive, which sets a bit of a policy direction. And of particular relevance to corporate parenting is extending those corporate parenting responsibilities to other government departments and relevant public bodies. I think given the work that we've done to really engage partners with the Corporate Parenting Board locally, puts us in a good position to take the opportunities that that policy direction presents. So I could talk forever, but I'm sure you will have read the report, and I'd really welcome any questions or comments that you have.
Questions? Councillor Crawshaw.
Well, I've always got a question. I'm just trying to wait. I was just interested actually around the adopting care experience as a protected characteristic, and you know, the sort of aspects around that, and in particular, I know some other local authorities have already sort of taken this step, and whether or not presumably other local authorities have corporate parenting boards in perhaps not necessarily exactly the same as ours, but similar sorts of models. And have we done any sort of reaching out to them in terms of what that change has meant for those corporate parenting boards, so that we can kind of get a bit of a head start in terms of what it means for us as a local authority?
Yes, completely. So this came to Council Executive on 14th of November, and really delighted that as a council we're going to be treating care experience as if it was a protected characteristic. That report noted that there'd been about 100 local authorities that had already taken that decision, some very fast out the gate. And I think our corporate parenting advisors, so these are people with care experience, they reached out and they did a lot of really thoughtful engagement work with all of those other areas and with care experience people locally, and also talking to national policy advisors in relation to this. And I think there's a mixed bag really in terms of how that has panned out in other areas. I wouldn't want to unfairly characterise or name any particular areas, but I think some, it's been a relatively tokenistic exercise. Some did that without necessarily actually taking time to engage young people and understand, would they find this beneficial or would they find that not beneficial? So I think we have taken the right approach in York. We have reached out to those other areas and taken our time to really consider the implications and options around this. Having done that detailed work, again, coming back to being really delighted the executive agreed to that motion. We have now begun the work with other corporate colleagues and obviously with young people about how do we start to make that real. When the 24-25 Corporate Parenting Board annual report arrives, you'll start to see some of that emerging. And we will be looking at where has this worked best and looking at what can we learn about what did they do in their implementation after it had been agreed. So that all forms into the action planning that we're doing and taking forward now.
That's really good to hear. I suppose as a corporate parent, as we all are, I guess at some point, I don't know whether it's perhaps an opportunity to sort of, re-engage within some cases and continue to engage in other cases, but just to think about, or perhaps we as a committee maybe want to think about, what does it mean for us then as corporate parents, the fact that this is the decision that we as a corporate body have taken. So I don't know that I'm saying that anything other than an observation and maybe an offer to or a suggestion that thinking about how we as the corporate parents are engaged as well within that, I think would probably be a helpful thing.
It's on the action plan, so that will happen. We've had a sort of pre-existing program of briefings and training and things like that for elected members, and obviously off the back of any elections as part of an induction program as well. We are going to be revisiting that and those resources to actually focus around protected characteristics and what that means and everyone's responsibilities within it. So thank you.
You will, Councillor please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. Sorry, do excuse me. Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report, Neil, Danielle, and to the young people involved. I'm interested in one or two things that have been, I'm going to drag up from the past. Initial health assessments remain at an abysmally low performance at 11% being completed on time. It's always been a problem, I know, but is there any way we can improve that? Sorry, it's page 99 of the pack, page 17 of the report. And the second bit is really encouraging to see that review health assessments and dental checks are doing really, really well. I'll come back with other questions later.
Thank you. Yeah, our performance around review health assessments and dental checks has gone from strength to strength. There is more of a challenge around initial health assessments. Some of that challenge, or not challenge, impact really is small numbers has an impact on us. However, we track all of them jointly with health, meeting with health weekly, looking at the reasons for them. And there are a number of different reasons. It's a really short time frame for initial health assessment. For an example is where, we're not able to get consent from mum or from dad, we wouldn't go ahead with a it needs to be clearly informed consent that takes place. Sometimes they're unaccompanied young people. We really need to do some work with them prior to that, so they understand what that is and why we're doing it, what the process is. So it does have an impact, and we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing. But we do track all of them on a weekly basis jointly with health. But yeah, accept that. And the board does scrutinise it. It's a regular discussion at the corporate parenting board, which it's there to do, to offer that challenge. But we do have real oversight of that.
I follow that up with one question. Is there any way you can encourage parents to give consent quicker?
I think that there's an awful lot that has been done jointly between social care and with health to aid those conversations. I think what we have to remember is at that point of a child or young person coming into the care system, I'm not sure any of us can imagine what that feels like at that time. So some of those conversations that we're needing to have, need to have them very carefully. But I think that we're doing all what we can do to ensure that we're discussing that properly, that the timing is right with that. But there's an awful lot going on in those initial stages, which can make that quite a challenge.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I may come back.
Okay. Councillor Mills.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for the report, and it's really nice to see the young people's voices kind of really front and centre. It's really, you know, it's such a positive change in the last year to have them co-chairing the board as well. You can see what a difference that's made to how they see their role, certainly from the foreword that they wrote. So that's really wonderful. I just wanted to ask about the voucher scheme, because when we introduced that, the scheme where emergency vouchers and emergency money can be accessed, that seemed like a really forward-thinking thing to me. I know that from care leavers and care experienced young people that I've worked with, it can be such a barrier. You know, a bill comes in, you know, they just don't have the money to make ends meet, or whatever thing has happened. So that voucher scheme seems great. I was wondering, because obviously it says it's up for review in March 2025. You know, where are we at with that? What's the thinking in terms of, do you feel it's been successful? Do you feel like it's really made a difference in breaking those barriers down? And is there a plan to continue that sort of access to an emergency fund?
Absolutely, I think it has an impact. I think young people would feed back that it does have an impact for them. You know, when we think with our own children, when they come with a problem and they need a little bit of help, then we would do that. So we would absolutely support that in terms of going forward. But in any event, we would always work to support our young people in the best way that we can. And if that's helping out here and there where we need to, as we would do with our own children, that is part of our local offer for our care experienced young people in any event, that we would have that fund where we can support with different aspects to help them achieve their outcomes.
That's great, thank you. And yes, I hope to see that does continue past March 2025. The one other thing that I was wondering about is, I know that there's a kind of section in here about employability. Am I right in thinking, I seem to remember us talking about this a while ago, about the council in its role as corporate parent really pushing kind of, can we get care experienced young people into apprenticeships? Can we get them working within CYC? You know, what can we do to support young people as an employer as well? I was wondering whether we have had an increase in, you know, young people coming out of our care system and coming to work for us, or?
I would say yes, but I don't have the data to hand, and I wouldn't be able to speak confidently to how well that's necessarily tracked within the organisation. But I would say certainly all of us are aware, because of the city the size that we're in, that we know that we have got a number of people with care experience that have come and got roles within the local authority and really added value. It is something that would be reflected probably more within the 24-25 report as well, because we had a report from Alison Eadson as skills manager presenting a number of different options about where we could go next as a council on that journey. So we've made some progress. What's the next stage of progress we could make? Alison is likely to be returning to corporate parenting board later this year with a further update in relation to that. So yes, we have made progress. There is more that we can do. And, you know, with the Corporate Parenting Board is performing its function really in exploring what those options are and helping young people to shape and influence what happens next.
Brilliant, thank you.
Councillor Clifford.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to come back about page 20 of your page 20 of your report and page 100 in the pack, and say how much I welcome the move to from a one-size-fits-all local offer to a much more graduated approach, and also the comments of the National Advisor for Care Leavers. That's really encouraging.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Caution.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just caveat this with I've asked similar sorts of questions when we do like you know, workforce surveys and that sort of thing. But I'm just interested. So in the You Matter survey, which there's quite a lot of statistics sort of spattered through, from what I can work out, there's about 35, 36 people have completed that survey, and there's probably, well, at least 240 something children that are currently being looked after, and I think this also includes care experience as well. So it's probably quite a small sort of overall fraction of the people who could have completed the survey, and I fully understand that we're talking about potentially cohorts of children and young people that really might not want to be completing these sort of studies. But there's a few things that just kind of jumped out at me as kind of questions from the statistics, just to kind of reassure myself and also just try to interpret them. Just on page 94, so page 7 of the report, just of the very headline figures. So the very first one is 95% of the young people in care reported that they feel safe where they're living. So presumably at least one person has said that they don't feel safe. And I wasn't sure whether or not this is an anonymous survey or whether there's a mechanism or something that can just follow up and try to understand when somebody does give a response that, you know, might have an alarm bell, I suppose. And then right at the bottom of that little list of 4, it says 85% of care leavers reported that they felt happy where they're living. And so presumably that's 15% that don't. But then I imagine if you ask most teenagers, I know my own teenagers, depending on what day you get them, they might tell you that they're, you know, very unhappy where they're living. And I just wondered if we have any sort of comparator to, not all of it obviously will be relevant, but, you know, the general sort of health and well-being of the care experience community in the city versus the kind of general children and young people's population, as it were. I appreciate I may be asking you questions that you're not able to quickly and easily answer. I don't know.
So I do enjoy a challenge. So You Matter survey is biannual, and the last time that it ran, which is the statistics that are in the paper, there were 41 children that were in care at that time that took part. Obviously, we have a number of children that are of an age where they wouldn't take part in a survey like that. We've got then 39 care leavers that took part in the survey as well. So as a percentage of the cohort, it's a reasonably healthy percentage. A lot of times, whilst it is available as an online survey, it's also completed in person at times where that young person might need support to be able to engage with it meaningfully. That comes on to the second point, which allows sort of exploration of some of those comments as well. So if there are young people that are saying that they're not feeling safe, it does allow that opportunity. There's other mechanisms in place that if we wanted to, we would be able to narrow down, if not necessarily specifically identify which young person was taking part by the profiling things. But these are also questions that we would expect social workers and pathway workers to be asking with those young people. So it shouldn't be coming as a surprise to us to hear that. There are different opportunities to be able to do that kind of profiling. The point you make is a really important one about we should think, how would that compare to the general population? It's not necessarily that it's realistic to aim that we'll get to 100% across everything. We don't have directly comparable data. There is some data which happens at a national level through the Bright Spot survey, which could give us some insight, but the questions don't exactly align. And then at a local level, probably the closest data set that we have is the public health survey that happens through school, which I'm sure some colleagues will be aware of. So those are the closest ones. We will be repeating the next UMatter survey in the new year. So it's a helpful piece of thinking. We'll look for opportunities for how we can draw some of those comparisons to help set it in a bit more context.
I've got a question which you may have slightly answered there. It said that all young people do a personal education plan, and yet only 74% said they attended. Now, it could be because they're age thing again, but you know, it's one of the few sort of not great looking statistics that I saw. Everything else looked really good, but only 74% they attended, and only 52% said they had a copy of their personal education plan. So if they're all having a personal education plan, is it a case of who could have answered it, or is that something we should be worried about?
So that information is something that we then share back with colleagues working in schools, and we have strong virtual school head arrangements. And as I mentioned, you'll have had the more up-to-date information come on the 1st of October from Karen Young, the virtual school head. We would want to see that number higher. You know, it's their personal education plan. All the personal education plans are quality assured by the virtual school, and they will work with whichever education establishment they're in to try and make sure that they're as good as possible. But actually that tells us that there probably is a bit more work that we could be doing with that group of young people to make sure that they see the value in those plans and understand that they are their plans and are an important part of helping to shape their future. So whilst I wouldn't say concerned, I think that's part of the value of doing surveys like this, is understanding how are young people feeling about the support around them. And that's somewhere where, yes, we would want to see a bit more engagement there. I think given that survey data comes from 2023, I would hope that when we repeat a survey in the new year, we'll see what the response has been to that, and that young people would feel more engaged, but we'll see what that tells us.
Probably not from that, sorry, go on.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to come in on that point, and just for us to be mindful that children and young people in our care have a number of different plans. They may have a personal education plan, a healthcare plan, an education, health and care plan alongside a care plan. So they have all sorts of documentation that we work with them to help young people to understand, and they're not necessarily things that you would have, you know, that you would need to have in place. So we are about to embark on a piece of work with our young people, having conversations with them about what should that look like. You know, this is your plan. How do we combine all of that together so that it's really meaningful for you? It makes sense for you because you're the most important person within all of that. So we are just about to embark on that piece of work with them to understand what we can do differently there. Now, these are statutory documents that we do have to have, but there must be a way of doing that differently, and that's what we're exploring with young people. So it doesn't surprise me that at times, you know, that is complex for some of our young people to even understand that, or that, you know, we should even have an expectation of that. So hopefully that piece of work will really help us move forward and think about how we can be more creative and do things differently.
Cool. Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thanks, Chair. I'll come in now and say my piece on this and in general. I think firstly I want to sort of say thanks again to the officers. It's a hard job. I mean, following on from my last report, you know, these are often complex situations, lots of different barriers for young people, and quite frankly, it's young people in general. You know, they're complex beasts, and they're wonderful and fantastic, but you know, getting everyone together is a challenge sometimes. I also want to just pay tribute to Lauren and Owen, who are my co-chairs on the corporate parenting board. Honestly, the preparation that they put in is fantastic, phenomenal. Really, they are a tribute to and a credit to all young people, really. And they certainly make my job easier because it means I don't have to chair as much of the board. But the key thing really for me is that, you know, these are care experienced young people who take this corporate parenting really seriously. And it's just an opportunity for me to say to everyone that I hope that we take that as seriously. You know, I think that I certainly do. I know my colleagues do. But I think across the council, whenever we get an opportunity to challenge people about taking corporate parenting seriously, we should. And just a few of the key changes for me that have happened. Firstly, as I've mentioned, the co-chairs. Secondly, the subgroups. The questions that have been raised tonight. I mean, we've introduced 3 different subgroups on to the board. Initial health assessments, Councillor Cuthbertson mentioned. So we have a health subgroup, and I was there yesterday talking about exactly that. Education, yeah, one of the first things that came up was personal education plans and how we get engagement with that to work properly and better, amongst other things. And then housing is the other subgroup, and that is an area that, you know, in terms of working as one council, getting our housing colleagues to realise that they are corporate parents in the same way has been really, really positive, and has really improved that local offer for young people, and how that links in with housing. And that has come directly from young people themselves and how that works. So I just think that everything you've got here is a real credit, and it's really showing a massive improvement. And then that is resulting in that change to that local offer, in that recognising of care experience as if it was a protected characteristic. And it's, you know, recognised in the corporate parenting advisors and winning awards and the work that they do. You know, it's a really positive piece of work again. But yeah, I just want to finish by saying that the young people themselves are taking this really seriously. So I really hope that we take this seriously as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree. Any more comments? All happy? Thank you very much. Good report. Right, now to the tricky bit. As Councillor Webb said, we've got fostering report going to come to us in January. And as I said at the beginning, if you remember the last meeting, Councillor Pavlovich also wants to bring a piece of work which is coming to the executive next week, I think. And the 12th, it was the 12th, we just gave a principled, we didn't mind the idea, but we want to see more detail. And that's what we got. Some data came through yesterday evening. We want to then discuss it further. So we have to squeeze in 2 extra, and I would probably say decent sort of quality pieces of work for us to get stuck into, rather than just, I'm not decrying the reports we get, but actually we can influence the way the council do something. So I think it's important we'd make room for Foster and the local model. The difficulty we have is time running out and where we can fit it in. So we could make SACRA just a guillotined short report and written questions and put fostering in on the 14th of January. Would it be here for us for the 14th, Councillor Webb?
The fostering report. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it in draft. I've given my comments on it. So as far as I'm aware, officers are happy and willing for the 14th of January. Yeah.
And so we're happy, we will shorten SACRA. Digital inclusion, do we want to have a full one or a shortened one, or do we want to take a judgment attainment gap? I think we do need to keep as it usually comes. I think that's massively important. Is it do we think attainment as it normally comes, SACRA shortened, digital as it normally comes, plus fostering, or do we shorten digital and spend a long time talking fostering? Councillor Closhaw.
I think that would end up being probably too much for a meeting, and I think we might be better. I agree completely about the SACRA report. It comes to us, I think, just anyway to note really. I would suggest that the digital inclusion of any of the 3 that are on there is the one that we could stand to bump. And if we looked at bumping that into March and then maybe considered taking the finance and performance Q3, I mean, it's down for information anyway, but really quite strictly for information.
Yeah.
Then I think that March would still be a manageable agenda, and then that creates a bit more space to be able to get our teeth into.
The only thing we then got to fit in is the local model. Councillor Webb.
Could I just comment on the fostering strategy as well? Whilst the committee is, please do it to death. To be honest, you've sort of done it to death already without seeing the paper tonight. So don't forget the questions that you asked and had the answers tonight, because there's no point in doing it all again. So don't, you could spend half an hour on it really. And I think you've already kind of spent half an hour on it tonight. But of course, you've not seen the words. So again, I'm just making suggestions.
Local model. Do you want to put that in January, or do you want to have we've got February if you wanted to have a standalone briefing meeting without it going to public? We could find time in February because February's got no meeting. Councillor Crawford.
You might upset them services and officers given its budget. I think that's part of the reason why February's empty.
Only one meeting.
Well,
I don't mind upsetting. I'm sorry.
Feel free to. I'm just suggesting that might be the pushback. I know that all scrutiny, as far as I understand it, there's no scrutiny in February.
It's not a scrutiny meeting; it's a briefing meeting. Anybody else got any views on when we can see this local model? Because remember, at the end of last meeting, there's quite strong views in terms of how it looked, and I know we've got some information now to explain how we got to that. But Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to say, I'm wondering whether we're actually suggesting we do both those things in January. We actually do half an hour on the fostering, which gives us probably 2 with attainment and, I don't know, 3. Would that be 3?
Be 3. Yeah, be attainment, fostering, and local model.
Local model.
I mean, we could do March, but then is March too late for the local model?
But then fostering is only half an hour, isn't it? It's quite
What if you were very strict about any questions for finance, for the finance performance report to be sent in advance?
Just
Or
whether or not we wait till March for local model. I tell you what, we'll put them all in January. We'll have attainment, fostering, local model. I'll speak to Councillor Pavlovich. If he thinks we need more time, I'll upset them services and we'll have a standalone meeting in February. And then we'll look digital into March and make finance short. There you go, sorted. Thank you very much, everybody. No urgent business. We finished reasonably early for us lot. But another good night. I enjoy these meetings. Thank you very much. Good night and Merry Christmas.